You know, we're having a very good African Liberation Day this time again, but as we say in the PACM, nothing's deter us. You know, through all adversities, we will always find a way to bring this important event to you. So for the second year, we are online, and as you know, online has its difficulties, but it also has its blessings. One of the blessings is that we can have an esteemed panel today, you know, stretching right around the Pan-African world. So I welcome all those to the panel. We'll do. We will have a bit of time that we will go around and the person can introduce themselves. This is about the the empowerment of the empowerment of African diaspora. Now that's very, very important when we look at economics, because to me, economics is the crux of independence. Economic independence, you will be forever in servitude. We know that many African countries were given a so-called independence in the 1960s and early 1970s. And I like to qualify something. When I say Africa, remember at all time, I'm talking about the continent and also the diaspora, because we are a mirror image of ourselves. When our brothers and sisters are suffering, we are suffering. When we are suffering in a diaspora, in the continent, we are connected at the hip. We are the same people. So the economic affects Africa, also affects us. So we're here today to look at how we can go forward in Africa and with diaspora, be it in the Caribbean, Americas, or in Europe. So at this point, I'll open up then what I'll do now, ask the first question. Well, the first point I would like to at and ask is that, do you think that African continental free trade area will solve or will go a long way in solving Africa's economic problems? So when we go around, before you start your answer, just please introduce yourself briefly, say what you do, say something about yourself, and then we'll look at discussing the first point about the African continental free trade area. It started the 1st of January this year, so we're into the 5th month. Now we want to look, can we see changes in Africa since this free trade area is coming? Is it working? Is there resistance to it, both from Africans and outside of Africa? At the best, it can be rolled out in an effective way that will benefit Africa. Now I have with me an esteemed panel today, and at this point, I'll the elder on the panel. That's Dr. Obati Shaka, who has been a long supporter of the Pan-African Congress movement. In fact, I was told it was in the visit to Dar es Salaam in 1974 for the 6th Pan-African Congress that members who were then formed the PACM first, and you can see they have connected ever since. It's a fruitful relationship. So Dr. Shaka, I'll come to you first. So in terms of the African Economic Free Trade Area, how effective do you think this could be in solving Africa's economic problems?
I think it's too early to tell um, how effective it will be, but it's certainly a good idea that Africans have, due to neo-colonialism, been wired economically to have more relationships with the former colonial power than they have with neighbors next door. So their economies have been wired more to the outside so that their goods could be transferred, that is, their raw materials, to the West. And the terms of trade are pretty well set by the former colonial powers, particularly Britain and France, but now the United States and now other global powers. So the idea of Africa having free trade between different nations is very important. People like Julius Nyerere, they were calling for uh, African economic cooperation based on regional zones, and that was also a part of his first step towards unification on the African continent. But I think that you have to really go and look at what's the problems inside of African countries when it comes to their economy, and what's the problem in terms of how the African nations are organized. And I would say the biggest obstacle to Africa moving either for economic cooperation or for eventually achieving African unity is, and this is one that African leaders were blindsided by, didn't see at African independence, only Cabral came close to seeing it, is that with independence, Africa inherited the European nation state. And that European nation state is a stranglehold on African political development, social development, and economic development. And it was interesting. I was watching, or I was reading an interview with between Julius Nyerere and a man named Bill Sutherland. And Bill Sutherland was the highest ranking African from outside of Africa to work in Tanzania. I knew him, and he was close to Nyerere. So this was after Nyerere's period of rule, and Nyerere is one of the best leaders that Africa had. His Ujamaa villages had a lot of merit. They also had some inherent weaknesses, the biggest one of which was this nation state system that was being used to manage it, because the success of Ujamaa in part failed because the administrators of the state, who behaved just like the colonial administrators, sabotaged it. That was only one reason. There were other reasons. But that was a big move towards economic empowerment, because in a society in which the economy is primarily agricultural, then of course building your base starting with agriculture and then moving up, that's the way to move. And my organization, Pan African People's Organization, that's worked with Pan African Congress movement since the 1974, 1975, we sent people in, myself included, 10 of us. We worked in the Ujamaa villages for 3 months in 1973. I lost 10 pounds working in the Ujamaa villages. It was hard work. We slept on concrete floors, and we got to see the progress people were actually making. But because the way the European nation state is modeled, which Africa inherited in its colonial and then in its neo-colonial form, they inherited the worst part. And the essence of what's wrong with the European nation state, and it hinders African economic development, is it is set up to protect private property, particularly the property of multinational corporations. It is basically an institution to transfer wealth from, in this case, Africa to Europe and the United States, and now China or anywhere else in which you have others working in Africa. It's set up that way. And that's under John Locke's system. Those of you who are from the UK, second treaties of government. The United States is truer to that system than the British, because John Locke didn't have any king or queen in his system. Neither do the Americans, but the kings and queens, particularly the kings in America, are the corporations that dominate everything and
Okay.
impoverish the world. So I think that for this to work, as well as for African unity to get off the ground, you have to really look at refashioning that nation state so that the people run it as opposed to a few who end up ripping everything off that comes into Africa.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'd like to turn now to Brother Mandingo. Brother Mandingo, this African Economic Free Trade Area. Um, I know there's been a pandemic, so there hasn't been a lot of traveling. So, but from what you can see, is things looking better? That's Brother Mandingo.
First of all, I give thanks to Onyame Olodumare Chukwu, the creator. Yes, the idea of this free trade area is one which is welcome, because the artificial barriers between various countries, overwhelming majority of them, which were artificially formed to suit the interests of the European racist imperialists. It is absolutely important that in each of these countries, most of them who came about by balkanization, artificial construct, which bore no relationship to the organic African states that existed before. It is important that we, as Pan-Africanists, in each of these countries, in Mother Africa and in the diaspora abroad, work to dismantle these artificial states, because they were not designed to promote African unity, not designed for the benefit of Africans at home and abroad, but on the contrary, were specifically designed to suit the interests of our enemies. Now, one of the things as a Pan-Africanist, actively from 1968 with Marcus Garvey Jr. in Jamaica, my physics teacher at Kingston Technical High School, and the leader of our political party, the African Nationalist Union. We have always recognized that Africa, which is the richest continent, has the lowest standard of living for Africans because of the racist, imperialist carve-up and division of our motherland. And this is why it is absolutely essential for Pan-Africanists in wherever we are to work together across whatever frontiers to get rid of the puppets who work on behalf of our enemies. And I cite Ghana as a prime example. President Kwame Nkrumah, who in his autobiography said that of all the literature that he read, the one that inspired him the most was the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. worked towards the implementation of there be no economic barriers between the various areas in Mother Africa. And because President Kwame Nkrumah was foremost in pursuing this implementation of the black print of Marcus Garvey, meaning the industrialization of Mother Africa, also the production of food, because a people cannot be independent if they cannot feed themselves. Anyone who depends on others to feed them is under the total control of those who they depend on for the very sustenance of life. And Kwame Nkrumah was attacked by the European imperialists who came together because he posed the most significant danger to their interests in Africa. The motorway that President Kwame Nkrumah started about 12 miles, 19 kilometers from Tema, the harbor city, connecting Accra, was designed as part of that necessary infrastructure that is absolutely necessary to connect our people. It was opened in 1965, and by the 24th of February 1966, he was overthrown by traitors who were assisted by the British and the USA.
Okay, I'm going to, yeah.
So my final, where this is concerned, is that the industrialization program that he started to implement, in line with what Marcus Garvey said, that we as Africans must master science and technology, because the race that does not master science and technology will either be exterminated or enslaved by the races who master science and technology. That program,
okay, man, you've got quite a bit to get through. So keep our answers sharp and concise. Otherwise, I've not got quite a few people to get to. So, point. I'd like to welcome to Asha, who is, and also Brother Subelo. I'd like to welcome them to the discussion. Next, I'd like to go to Brabiola. Brother Abiola, I know you PACM in France, a very active Pan-Africanist group. And, so what do you think in terms of the free trade area, and how effective do you think it can be?
Greetings, brother. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will jump straight to it. I think we can already foresee that this free trade zone won't solve any problems because we already have regional organizations and regional markets, and they are already either not working or not working well enough. We have SADC in South Africa and Zimbabwe, etc. We have ECOWAS in West Africa. We have also the East African community, and they are not even working well currently. There are a lot of problems. There are a lot of barriers to do trade between inside those regions. So I don't see how we can jump from this state to do business globally in a free trade zone on a continental level. I don't think it's realistic at all. We have already seen a lot of announces in the past with those kind of projects, and usually they don't go anywhere. So I don't think it will work. The current leaders also are not Garveyites. They are not work. They are working actually to keep Africa separated. They are not working on a political union. So they are trying to copy the European Union which is already not working because they are trying to separate the economic realm from the political realm. So the European Union is already not working, and we are trying to copy that. So it's another indication that this project won't work. So I will finish by saying that Kwame Nkrumah already said that we have to get the political realm first, and the economic realm will come then. He explained that we need to unify Africa politically, and it was more than 60 years ago. And Sheikh Anta Diop also already gave us a blueprint in his book, Black Africa, Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federal State. So the federal state is the goal. The current leaders are not Garveyites, so we always have to, by default, set our expectations very low. What we need is not a free trade zone. What we need is one African state with one government, one passport, one currency, one army, and that's all.
Okay, that's a very good point. Now, I'm turning to brother. How are you? Brothers, Cypher.
Oh, how you doing, brother? You okay?
Okay, yes. Yes. So, what's your take on the free trade area from Westland? I mean, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think, say, for instance, if it gets, do you think Africans in the diaspora benefit from such a coming together African states?
I think that these processes of actually developing an African economy globally, these are not processes that are going to take place quickly. You're not going to get them perfect quickly. You know, the EU's taken 50 years to get to this stage. And when they originally started off with 6 countries, it was purely the EEC, and it was purely an economic union. And over the last 40, 50 years, those countries have further integrated, and you've seen the political bonds develop as the economic bonds also developed, because the reality of it is, for me and you to do trade, eventually we're going to have to sort out and refine the politics so that the economics can run smoothly. So I think these are building blocks that need to be refined. So I look at it like of anything that can assist and support the development of an African economy, a Pan-African economy, a Black economy in our communities in the UK or in the diaspora, anywhere in the diaspora, I support. But I also recognize that these things, you're building something that needs to be refined. So when you build it, it's not, I don't expect it to be perfect immediately. I expect these things that the need for them to be improved, for them to be a process of improvement and refinement until we get to the right stage.
Okay, that's a good take. So now I turn to Brother Dale. How are you, Brother Dale?
Unmute.
I am well, brother Tarka. How are you? Well?
Okay, great. Yes. So, as somebody from the nation now, what's your take on the African? Something that say your generation would live to see.
Yeah.
Really economic African force in the near future, or this future, or mid future. I think it's something that's heading in.
You know, I'm a Yoruba man, but I'm from the place as they like to call Nigeria, which means I have no faith in leadership over there. You know, so what that means to me is that, you know, I hear free trade agreement, but to me it smells of shit, and it sounds like this idea of free market economics, which was just another opportunity to allow the richest to have no barriers to entry for their selfish, you know, agendas. So I can only speak for Nigeria, and I know for a fact that there has been a lot of barriers to people who want to take goods across border. Only Dangote, richest man in Africa, they call, has had no problem. Previous, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Exploitation of this new policy. So, and what I wanted to go on to say was just that, the real problem I find, or I would see from my perspective, would be the infrastructure to make cross-border trade a legitimate option for individuals to make money. If we talk in terms of the traditional system, or I hate to keep bringing it back to Nigeria, but it's just a great example of the weakness of the naira. The individual who thinks that his business can succeed in a bordering town would mean that for him to make that decision, he needs to have the disposable income. He needs to be in enough profit for it to make enough sense. And I think that a lot of these problems in terms of what an individual can do versus what Nigeria, they like to call them big men, a big man. He's like, oh, guy, he's making money. He might have made money in various corrupt means. It doesn't matter. But the point is that if you have reached the elite status in Nigeria or in Africa, then maybe cross-border trade is something that is open to you. But the point is that the people are not having access to that, what that free trade agreement could mean. And I've been asked to come on to digital currency and advent of
we're gonna come to that a bit.
I'll bring it back.
We're gonna touch on that in a bit. We're gonna come on to that definitely. So now I'd like to go to Dr. Asha. I know you're Malawi is more or less home now. So what's been your experience in the African continent, and do you think this the area, do you think it's something that is a positive for the future?
Okay, greetings everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me, and my apologies for my lateness.
Yes, we can hear you very clear.
Oh, good. I'm speaking to you from Malawi. And I mean, I don't want to repeat what's already been said, except to say that he who pays the piper calls the tune. And never in the history of our existence, from enslavement to colonialism to neocolonialism to whatever we have today, has there ever been a time where the piper allows those dancing to the tune to do anything in relation to self-determination? There is an innate hatred of any opportunity for African men to get up off their knees economically and be independent of colonial masters. There is an innate drive that stops the piper from sleeping at night unless he knows for certain that he is calling the tune about what financial liberation will look like. And whilst we've got our leadership puppets in place, they will continue to enrich themselves, because that's the only reason a free trade zone is being talked about, because you can bet everything that we have that those who are currently milking Africa dry for all its wealth and resources whilst the people suffer will only find an easier way to do it, because our colonial current leaders dressed up in colonial clothes will be the ones who will front the justification for this. I see nothing in it. I think it looks good on paper, and I think we have to be doing something else to make sure that those of us who know what time it is on the outside are pressuring to try to get something else parallel to this that may or may not feed into the nonsense that they're talking about. But nothing new here to see. Let's move on.
Okay. Right, I'll turn now to Brother Sibelo. From your vantage point, say in Azania, this African continental free trade area, because I've heard it said that The only African countries that stand to benefit is the big economies such as Tanzania, Nigeria, probably Kenya and so forth. And the smaller countries will totally be just overrun and pushed aside. So what's your take on the whole thing?
Thank you very much, Brother Tahaka, and good evening to all the viewers. Brother Tahaka, I think the position basically is that the only way it can be made to work, if at all it will, is when it is people-centered. For as long as looking at it from a perspective where it's government that is driving it, definitely it will benefit just the big economies. But to even say it's benefiting the big economies is not necessarily correct. Like what Brother Dayo was saying, that there are just a couple of individuals who actually will stand to benefit. When the talk of big economy normally is touted, it gives the impression that it's the entire economy that is benefiting. But in actual fact, it's only a select few within that particular economy that are really benefiting. So we need to find a way whereby we as ordinary people take advantage of trade at a localized level and test the system, see to what extent exactly it is working for us, where we can have an intra-African trade system which is informed by the so-called small medium-scale enterprises, and at the same time see how we can foster a direct relationship with the diasporans. Because what Dr. Asha was saying is absolutely correct, that the fact that the United Kingdom breaks away from the EU and the free trade is signed, basically coinciding, it's not a mistake. They prepared themselves for the opening of Africa so that they can take advantage of that particular space. And Europe is also looking at how they can further their interests on the continent. So we have to be very careful not to celebrate too much, and we also have to find ways and means by which the responsibility is not entrusted upon government, because government is not there for the people. Government is there to serve its masters. As long as the masters are satisfied, that's fine. The people will basically fall away. So my basic take in a nutshell is that it's a good thing for as long as we, the people on the ground, can find the ways and means of making it work for our interests without waiting for government to take the lead. For as long as we expect government to take the lead and take us forward, they'll continue misleading us as they have always done since the days of so-called independence, which we know is all but fake. So that is the basic position from the continental perspective, that the big economies, definitely they will benefit a lot, but it's only a couple of players who will benefit from within those so-called big economies.
Okay. I'd like to move on to the other point now, because I know Brother Deo mentioned in terms of currencies how weak they are. Because let's face it, most African countries, if you live with their currency, remember I left one time, I think it was in Gambia, with some currencies and walked into a bank. When I got back to try and change, and they virtually laughed at me. So African currencies basically have no value. So do you think with the rise of digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, do you think that present Africa with an opportunity, especially the people on the ground, with an opportunity to, to log into something that could be much more effective than the currencies they're using at the moment, which outside borders of Africa, it's not recognized at all. So again, I'd like to go to Dr. Obati Shaka for his take on the digital and cryptocurrency situation.
Digital currency is interesting. The problem with it is it's volatile, and people who are poor who invest in it could make money in 1 minute and lose it in the next. And a lot of it, I think, depends on how the big players play with it. So I don't think that Africa's future economically is with innovations in currency. Uh, Africa's currency is not recognized on the world market, for example. So you end up having to convert whatever you produce into foreign currencies, and you're going on the terms of trade that are being set by the West and now China. China's currency is recognized in Japan globally. So our currencies aren't even recognized in African countries. I want to go back to the problem. The first problem is the nation state. And at this point, because, you know, we need to go beyond it in terms of continental unity, that's going to be a big thing. The nation state that Africa inherited is not designed to empower the people. So we have to look at models that come out of our history to reconceptualize. Brother Abiola made the reference to Sheikh Diop towards a federated state. And he made reference to what he saw as one form in a continental unity of what he called bicameral assembly. And what he was talking about there was male and female being empowered. I've done a work called Return to the African Mother Principle of Male and Female Equality, where I go and look at what was the basis for, first of all, African family systems before the coming of the Europeans and, you know, before the coming of Islam. And what I showed that was that they were basically balanced. I called them not matriarchal or patriarchal, but twin lineal, with an interplay of male and female. African nations played off of the way lineages were organized, the way families were organized. And prior to the coming of Islam and Christianity, you had a lot more balance. One, because males and females were empowered. Two, because their economic system was communal, not based on private property. Private property in a house, private property in money, but not private property in land, air, and water. And we need to break that, because as long as we have that, the powerful will control the wealth. And that was John Locke's system. John Locke's system is for the few to grab everything, and private property was his God. And for my people, anyone who was put in the Western Hemisphere, we became property. So those are the things that I think need to be broken. That won't be easy. But at the village level, people know that. I was in Tanzania a number of times, and if you got property, they would put a 99-year lease on it. And that was because they were compromising, but they didn't want to completely sell it. So, you know, I think that these are parts of the models we need, because if we're going to have continental African unity at some point, then it's going to have to be a new kind of way in which we run things, which is an old way updated.
Okay, that's good. So, Brother Mandingo, now the same to you. Term digital cryptocurrency, what do you think? Because, for instance, I think it's a cryptocurrency called the ACON, which you're trying to promote. And I was hoping to have some day also to talk about the Lumi that you may know about. That's a currency, that a digital currency that's being promoted in the community. So what's your take on digital currency or cryptocurrency in terms of the African economy?
What they call cryptocurrency is not the solution. The solution is that economic and political integration, unification, must go hand in hand. It must not be a situation of political unity first, then economic unity, or vice versa. As Africans, we have to implement both. It has to be a combination of political and economic integration. And what this means is that we have to remove virtually all the so-called heads of state in these African states. They are not leaders. I hear people talking about leaders. One must not refer to traitors who work for our enemies as leaders. That is totally wrong. And that is fooling those of our people who are not aware of things to be calling traitors and puppets leaders. They are not leaders. They are enemies, traitors, who must be removed by any means necessary, because they are the internal enemies who continue to hold back or a hindrance to African unity. So my position is that wherever we are in the mother continent and in the diaspora, working together as Pan-Africanists, economically and politically, and must involve the removal of these traitors, because these traitors, as history has shown, have always worked to help their racist masters in getting rid of our progressive, independent African leaders. And this was why when I started, I gave the example of President Kwame Nkrumah as a typical example. Recently, we have had President Magufuli of Tanzania. And it is no accident that he was attacked the way he was attacked. Blatant lies told on him because he was pushing the Pan-Africanist agenda, which is totally against the interests of our enemies. So we need to deal with that, because this situation of talking about having a so-called free trade and barriers free and so, it is designed to only benefit the very, very few at the expense of the vast majority. And anything for African liberation must automatically involve that which is best for the interests of the African race as a whole, and not for a tiny few. Asante,
Okay,
sir.
thanks for that. Okay. So now to your brother Abi, same question to you about cryptocurrencies or digital currencies in terms of what's going on in Africa, because let's face it, but it's no good for Africa, but people in Africa has taken it up, are using it in an way to get around the weaknesses currencies they have. So as we talk, it's been actively used on the continent in terms of trade. So how do you see the situation going forward then for the Abiola?
Thank you. I think it's a good opportunity for some businesses, some maybe entrepreneurs who can capitalize on that. But I see that as a very limited thing compared to the challenge that we have as a people, because it's a currency, and what kind of problems a cryptocurrency actually solve. If we see, for example, the most popular one, Bitcoin, it actually is a solution to do transaction anonymously, and that is why it has gotten popular. One of the biggest use of that in the beginnings was a project called Silk Road, and it was a place where criminals could go and buy things on the internet, like drugs and even worse things, using Bitcoin. And that is one of the most popular use initially of Bitcoin. So usually the real appeal here is anonymity. Yeah. And if we look at Africa, this is not the biggest problem. The problem is not doing transaction anonymously online. That is not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that we have countries, for example, where all the banks, all the banking system is controlled by foreign powers. If you look at West Africa, Central Africa, France actually controls the currency. And even for the countries who have that have their own currencies, it's not used for the people. It's not used for actually increasing the industrial production of the countries. So I don't think that currently cryptocurrency can be good for entrepreneurship in some sectors. Maybe it can be good for local organization, for community organization, and do some projects at a local level, and that's good. But I don't expect them to have a really big impact regarding our economic problems, which are so much larger.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Now, brother Cypher, same to you. Digital currency. You're taking digital currency. We have been told that it's not a solution. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about both in Africa and both in the diaspora. Do you see a way forward, especially with the younger generation who are more tech savvy and are looking at digital currencies and are able to see trends and are be able to see things which you can say the older generation are missing? Do you think that's a currency of the future?
I mean, one thing I would like to really kind of state firstly is how important economic development is for our communities. Because I'm living in a city whereby our young people see no other option, many of them, other than getting involved in activities where they could go to prison for 10, 15, 20, 25 years out of desperation to feed themselves and their families. But this is what's at stake here. We have to be very, very practical. Can't kind of be metaphoric about this thing. We have to be very practical because we've got to save our young people, we've got to save our communities. So I'm going to go on to your next point. Cryptocurrencies or crypto assets is just part of any kind of financial, it's just another type of financial investment. It's another type of financial asset. No individual financial asset, whether it be land or whether it be property or whether it be bonds or whether it be shares or whatever type of financial asset you name, none of them is the solution to all ills. So you're using cryptocurrencies or crypto assets is just another block in if you're going to build a portfolio of assets. Now, if you're talking about can we as organizations create funds within our communities or within nation states whereby we use assets such as land or property or cryptocurrencies and gold and minerals and or other different types of assets as a fund that we can build wealth to invest in our communities internationally, then that's another discussion. But the actual cryptocurrency in itself, whether it be Ethereum or whether it be Dogecoin or Bitcoin, none of them. It's not a one size fits all solution economically for anything. It's just part of a portfolio. What I do think and what I do see is if you look at Middle East countries and what they're doing now, is they are trying to create these sovereign wealth funds where they invest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and land and property and buy football clubs in Europe so that they can create wealth to build and develop their countries. Me personally, I think that we have to focus at all times for 10 years straight on how we can develop our economies in our communities, in the diaspora and our communities on the continent. and be practical. Do things which actually make a difference, because we all know, whether it be in Chicago or New York, or whether it be in Kingston in Jamaica, or whether it be on the continent itself, right? We can sit here and we can say, we can metamorphosize about these things, but practically our young people are going out there in the need to be able to find money and doing things that and putting themselves at risk. We've got to have solutions that actually work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, Brother Dale, same to you. I know that's an area that you know quite a bit about. So you have heard what I've said so far. So what's your take on it? Do you think we can build on for the future?
Unmute.
Hold on, we're not in you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, yes. I think I'm the only one that's Team Bitcoin here. So let's see if I can convince anybody that yes, I believe that cryptocurrency does act as a real solution for us. Obviously, the technology is not going to come and save us. We are the only people that can save ourselves. However, I believe that the technology could be an extremely powerful tool in the armory of any true revolutionary. And just following on from the brother who just spoke, he said we have to be practical, and I think that's a very, very important word. And the practicality is that in Africa, across Africa right now, young people are adopting cryptocurrency en masse. Nigeria is the #1 adopter of Bitcoin in the world. What does that mean? It means that these Nigerians have spent their whole lives with this inferior form of money, and they have opted out from it and chosen a new form of money. Now, there's this law, and I can't remember the name specifically, but it's called Jenkins Law, and it's a law of money that just basically means if there's a superior form of money in circulation, that will always be the choice of the society. And I think what we're finding right now is across Africa, many people are making that decision to opt out from the traditional finance and go into cryptocurrency. So I think it's not for us to decide whether or not it can. It already is acting at that solution. And we have too many leaders back home in Africa who don't offer real leadership to our people because they don't care about the issues that they care about. Now, all of us in this conversation, if we care about Africa, we have to care about digital. We don't have to necessarily care about it, but we have to start taking it seriously because it has been taken seriously en masse across Africa. Now, more than the weakness of the currency, right now, anytime we are transacting with one another, there's a white man in between. Whether that be in Nigeria, whether that be over here, if you're using the naira is pegged to the dollar. The dollar is the world reserve currency of the world. So everything is quantified in dollars. Therefore, when you switch over to Bitcoin, what you're doing is you're opting out of that system, and all Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer technology that allows you to send money like emails. So what that means is that instead of having to deal with the central banker in America, who I don't know if anybody saw yesterday, but President Biden has pressed or is pushing Senate for another $6 billion of spending. If you saw the fine print, and actually, no, 6 trillion. And if you saw the fine print, that was 12 trillion altogether. Now, they printed a third of all the dollars in 2020. I mean, what does that mean? We only used to hear about these kinds of things in Zimbabwe 30 years ago. What that means is the purchasing power of every single one of us as individuals, as part of that legacy traditional system, is going down and inflation goes up. So I think a lot of people around the world will have been hearing about rising inflation across the world. That is as a result of these unilateral decisions being made by policymakers in Washington, being made by the Bank of England. Now, with cryptocurrency, you can't, and nothing that they're doing in those offices now concern you. So the ability of the oppressor to oppress is weakened by Bitcoin. You know, at one stage we had physical oppression, which formed into economic oppression, which arguably now is converting into a biological warfare. But that economic oppression, or their ability to control us economically, is significantly weakened by Bitcoin. So there's a lot of people in the Bitcoin space or the cryptocurrency space that you will see are now working on a long-term trajectory that is not saying that, you know, the governments are going to be powerless today or tomorrow, but soon enough, in 20 years' time, I can be a billionaire, I can have the money in my head, and the government won't be able to do anything to affect that. What does that mean? Obviously, we don't have Nigerian and African individuals with billions in their head or on the camera. But what that means is that if individuals such as us wanted to pool our money together to start creating institutions to create, like my brother says, sovereign wealth funds, we don't have to create a sovereign wealth fund that is looked after by a bank that we can't trust, a bank whose agenda is contrary to our agenda. We can create these funds on our own. We can create insurances, health systems, education systems that are completely permissionless and that have nothing to do with.
Yes, brother, I can see that you're very enthusiastic about.
I'll just try to give you as much as possible in the shortest.
Yes, yeah. You're one that sold on that and think that definitely is going to play part of future development. Now, the same to you in terms of digital and cryptocurrencies. I mean, how do you see it in terms of playing out in Africa? As Brother Dale says, digital currency, people have just took to the state of the currency that they normally use. So what's your take on it? How do you, going forward, how do you see currency playing out in Africa?
I'm assuming you're talking to me.
Yes, yes, Dr. Acha.
Yeah. I've got mixed views about it. I think the biggest concern for me is I completely agree with Brother Deo about the rise of cryptocurrency and the fact that Africa is adopting, particularly young Africa is adopting cryptocurrency as a way to opt out of doing business, economic business, the way it's always been done. My concern is, I think it's fine when you're working peer to peer, but what happens when you need to ground that currency? You know, in a way that enables the ordinary person on the street to transact. That is where I have the problem with it, because whilst I still think that cryptocurrency and things about cryptocurrency is still in the league of those who have access to knowledge and information, largely on the internet. And that isn't the majority of our people. And so that's the other side that worries me, because the fact that cryptocurrency has suddenly just opened up for everybody, I don't take as accidental and I don't take as a coincidence. And my biggest concern is that everybody wants to be rich and to be comfortable and to not have to beg bread. And people are rushing blindly into this. So many of our people have already lost money because they've been hoodwinked into putting over some of their finances in order to purchase cryptocurrency, and only to find that the whole thing is a fake and fraud. And that in itself puts a dampener on the positives that cryptocurrency can bring. There is a lot of work to do in our community because we don't even understand money. We don't even understand how standard money works. And so there is work to do there. it can't be either or. It's got to be both and if we're going down the road of including cryptocurrency as a financial, a potential financial solution. And right now, my biggest fear is that when these things just suddenly open up, then our people are being marched in lemming formation to a cliff edge with the little money that they have, so that cryptocurrency and all the other ones become the new economic pastors, because cryptocurrency becomes the new economic church for our people to give money to, in the hope that somebody there is going to look after it and make them rich. They're not even told that, you know what, you need to make sure you secure your identification for your wallet, or that's your money gone forever. They don't even know that. So I am worried. But I think if we go down this road, it's got to be both and, because our people do not even know how much it costs them per day to live in Babylon. They don't even know that. And that for me is a major problem.
Okay, this is yeah, same for Sabelo in terms of what you call currency. I suppose Tanzania would be a place that cryptocurrency would have taken hold, or like it be Nigeria and say.
Thank you very much, Brother Tahaka.
Kenya.
Yeah,
So what's your
definitely.
take on the cryptocurrency?
Sorry. Thanks, Brother Tahaka. Definitely, here in Tanzania, cryptocurrency has taken off on a very, very big scale. But then I must be quick to say I know very little about it. The points raised by Sister Asha, maybe it's primarily because we're both on the continent, and some of the things we are seeing are very similar. A lot of our people have bent their fingers big time. These crypto schemes. It's difficult to ascertain what to get into and what not to get into. There is no training that our people get into besides to be told of you put in $1 today, you'll have $100 tomorrow, you put it back in, you'll be sitting on 1,000. And people get so excited and people pump in so much money. There are people I know personally who have lost lots of money on this thing. And for that reason, some of us, particularly our generation, we kind of look on from a distance and are very careful to get actively involved in something we do not understand. But then I have a question which maybe Dayo may be able to answer. Who really controls this thing? Where is it controlled from? Because there is something I read, I think it was sometime last year, where there were some crypto things and the guy died and he was the only one with the password and people's monies got stuck in this, I don't know what it is, whatever it is, but people's money got stuck in that. And at the same time, if we put our resources into this and it is being controlled from the West, how sure are we that along the way someone is not going to tell us that the whole thing has crashed and they run away with all our money?
All right. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
All right, quick.
Onto that. I'll just go really quick and say I want everybody to understand Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as two separate things. If you're going to look into this, go and research Bitcoin on its own. Bitcoin was the new technology. Go and find out about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, there's nobody in charge of Bitcoin. There's no CEO, there's no leader. It was made by somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto, and to this day, nobody knows who he is. And that might sound a bit crazy, but we're 12 years down the line, over 1 trillion in assets in this, and nobody knows who he is. So there's a few theories. Arguably, he's an alien who came back in time. Some people say it was a group of developers who came together and understood the power of what they were doing and didn't want to get taken down by the government. So released it and then went back into anonymity. There is various different theories about who the original founder was. However, the original founder's identity does not matter because the tech is the tech. And there is 23 million Bitcoin. So there's no capacity to create more.
21.
Yeah, 21 million. Sorry, yeah. There's no capacity to add any more. So it's a completely scarce asset, and it can be divisible into many smaller parts, which means you don't need one Bitcoin. You can have individuals. So that means that if you understand Bitcoin as the one that gives this whole crypto market value, and then every other cryptocurrency, therefore, can operate in different ways. Like the brother mentioned Ethereum earlier. This Ethereum is the kind of network that could create insurances on the blockchain. So if all of us decided that we wanted to insure against anybody, you know, hurting their leg in this conversation, we're going to put £10 in each into this. What Ethereum creates is something called smart contracts. We could put our money into the smart contract, and upon the strict requirements we set in the tech being satisfied, the money could be released. So what cryptocurrency is it means you can create systems that don't require trust, that don't need central authorization, and is the whole point of you know, decentralization. And you know what you guys said with reference to people being scammed. You know, I've heard about these things before, but when, you know, I'm currently finishing off my course on Bitcoin because I'm really trying to teach my community about Bitcoin specifically. And what you'll find out is that Bitcoin is sovereignty of money. So there is nobody who should ever custody your cryptocurrency, specifically your Bitcoin. Nobody should ever custody it. Now, you can allow it to be custodied by crypto exchanges, which will allow you to convert it into traditional forms of money, which will allow you to trade it into other cryptos, which will allow you to do all kinds of finance products. You can trade, you can do various things. And there's so many different crypto exchanges which operate kind of like banks, which offer various good products. But what I love about the crypto market versus the banking market is I have the power in the crypto market. So there is various exchanges that offer me different things. I probably have about 4 different exchanges. One gives me a card that gives me cash back when I shop in Tesco. One of them gives me interest on my savings. Another one just helps me trade into other coins. Another one is on a hardware wallet that stays in my house offline that nobody can ever access. And that is what I'm trying to say. That is the truest technology that enables you to do. Keep your money in a way, and you're not going to plug it back in and discover someone's stolen it. No, no, no. The technology enables you to keep your money in a way that nobody can ever access it. But on the way there, yes.
Okay, Brother Dale.
That people
Can I?
No, I can see that you're very enthusiastic about that, and you're very persuasive. But just to say, cryptocurrency. I mean, it's like I said, there's Bitcoin, and there's also what they call alternate coins, and it's like they were saying to me, it's just technology. The technology at work. For instance, one called Carddass, the Ethiopian government has recently doing the same smart contracts because it's 9.99999% fraud proof or scandal proof. So they put in the education system through the Cardano platform. So a lot to learn. I mean, from the surface it may seem, but as you get into more, you know, technology when it first comes from people to me, first because of the lack of understanding, people are going to say, well, I don't understand it, I don't really know. But as you get into it more, the technology that underpins crypto makes sense. I've looked into it and it does make sense. The technology, the coin itself may be arguable, but the technology that it is tremendous. And just because how Africa is situated, it's like the phone didn't need to run copper wires to carry phone calls through copper wire. It went straight into the mobile age. And I know trading on the telephone, passing currency over the phone, Africa is a part of the world that does that. So it's a technology that actually Africa is leading the world in, because of the pickup from especially young people. Africa leads the world in as we speak. But I must move on. I mean, that's a topic that we could get
I'm
Brother
glad
Hart,
you picked up
bogged
on
down
that.
in.
With the
Though.
Brother
technology, we
Tahaka,
don't
can I make
even
can I make a
control.
point? Brother Tahaka, can I make a
Yeah,
point?
okay, Brother Cypher. Yeah, okay.
So the one thing I was going to say that I think it is useful is for me, who's done business in Africa, between Africa and the UK, one thing that I've experienced is high bank charges. So if you're transferring money
Yeah.
from the UK back to or from the UK to Africa, or from the Africa back to the UK, sometimes the charges are very expensive, and it takes a long time for the money to actually clear. So I think with what I know that some people are doing now is doing Bitcoin transactions,
Yeah.
whereby it's instant, isn't it? It's the transaction is made instantly, and there is no additional charges and things of that nature. I think it's useful for that now. The only thing that I think we have to be wary about is the volatility. And I think it's good that if you've got a transaction that needs to be made today at a fixed time, and we know what the Bitcoin price is at that specific time, and we make that transfer, then I think it can be very useful for international payments and stuff like that.
Okay, that's clear. Now, I'd like to move on to is the whole question now of, we're told Africa is the largest recipient of world aid. In fact, we're told summons without aid in given to them would totally be bankrupt and collapse. Now, looking forward, a book written, I think it's called Aid Not Aid. The most, see, I forgot her name. Shame on me, but it's a very popular book.
Dambisa
Her
Moyo.
event is
Yeah, she's called Dambisa
that's right.
Moyo.
Dambe Samoyo, that's one. That's the one. I think she's from Zambia. And it's arguing that in order to keep Africa impoverished, Europe, from the beginning, have always throwing money at Africa. Come and take. And when you had a few governments said, we don't want your money, we're more or less forced to take it. Because Africa is required to be in debt. That's how Europe started Africa. So when looking at aid, we know that to Africa, because take for instance, Britain said it's proud of its aid budget, how much it gives away. But is there anything for every pound that Britain gives in aid? Don't you think it gets something back? So the whole question of trade rather than aid to develop. What's your take on that? I'll get out with Dr. Oberty.
Yeah, definitely. If you're in a position to control your economy, trade based on what you produce is the basis for prosperity, assuming that the economy is one that equitably distributes wealth. And part of the problem is the West has often imposed conditions, for example, with trade, where they don't want a country like Jamaica or African countries to impose tariffs. America rose on tariffs. They rose on genocide, slavery, and stealing half of Mexico. But then they rose on tariffs. So, you got to protect whatever it is, that you produce. So aid, oftentimes, for example, structural adjustment that hit Africa in the 80s. Some bad aid came before that. And then what ends up happening is the West comes in and then imposes on you neoliberalism. And that is structural lynching. And then after, all the goodies that Africa produces, including water, is sold off to multinationals. Then they come in and say, oh, they made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. The IMF, the World Bank, was created out of Bretton Woods. to put America in power. And originally, the IMF was set up to aid Europe, World Bank. But what happens when the Marshall Plan comes in, then those institutions weren't needed for that. And so then they're used to establish economic control. So aid comes with dependence and control. And I think you need to look also at China in terms of their resource strategy and then also what they want back. So obviously, you know, we need to build up economies that can trade internally and on the world market, trade for profit for the country. But it's just like gross products, you know, the gross domestic, gross domestic product. These are being cited as progress for Africa. But where is that going? It's going to the pockets of very few people. So the people are not profiting. So trade and aid, it's ideal to operate without aid. One thing I liked about the Honorable Marcus Garvey, who was my first master, is he was into economic self-reliance. And that's not always possible. But to the degree you can be self-reliant, I think it's important. I just wanted to respond to a comment made by Cypher on the state of our youth and make a comment on that what you said is very important. And in Africa, you have a lot of people leaving Africa to go to the West because there's no employment in their country. And in the United States, our youth have been impoverished by deindustrialization that have taken jobs out of the country. They've broken up communities and stuck drugs in the community. So one of the things we need in terms of rebuilding Black communities, particularly I'm speaking in the diaspora, is we need massive job programs that produce jobs that produce good income, as well as business development. A lot of us put all the emphasis on business development, which I think is important. But if people don't have money in their pocket to support businesses, businesses are not going to work. I led a movement, San Francisco Freedom Movement. It was the only movement in the United States that defeated an entire economic power structure. We defeated corporations, banks, the Bank of America, supermarkets, departments, thousands of jobs. Those jobs are still there. We need campaigns like that along with economic development. And then, of course, Africa, the banks need to be putting money into small businesses, you know? Given the people who are really building up an economy, they're the ones that should get the, the money. And Jamaica should not be in the condition it's in. It should be a heaven on earth. And this country busted their economy through terrible economic policies that drove their economies into the dirt, including their milk industry. Powdered milk drove out good milk. You know what I mean? And a people that were self-sufficient in ground provisions now can't even have a beachfront house. You know what I mean? People are driven into poverty when they should be living in heaven. So, you know, I think it's a question of us constructing economic power. But that is also, as one of the previous commentators said, tied to political power, and the political power is not the European nation state. That is our biggest problem.
Okay, that's good. Now, I'm got half an hour left, and I still got another question. So, in answering, can we make them sharp and precise so that we can get through? So next, I'll turn to Mandingo. So, what's your aid versus trade argument? For instance, some country welcome aid, which you think it's just a coordinated which has been used to push people and make people dependent, and abandoning the country into the city because they think it's more because a lot of aid is coming to the city.
The thing about it is that the largest, the biggest recipients of aid are not Africans, but Europeans. I repeat that. The biggest recipients of aid historically and right now are Europeans and not Africans. Because Africa, which is the richest continent on planet Earth, natural resources, this is the aid that Europeans have been living off, like parasites and leeches, historically, and still do. And this is why any move for Africans to own and control their resources for our own benefit, which is why Kwame Nkrumah said that the irony is that Africa, with the richest resources continent, has the poorest standard of living because of European imperialism. What we need to do is take control of our natural resources, which is what I've been saying from the start. Because this is not a currency thing. Before there was currency, there's agriculture, which produces food and other things. We don't eat money, be it crypto or otherwise. We don't consume those things. We have real things that those are the resources that what Europeans have done is that they force by military means to destroy our organic African economies and impose their financial Dracula system with their currencies under the guise that they give us their worthless paper or whatever thing and say, oh, we are giving you aid. But it's a big lie. They are the ones who are getting aid from us. But of course, they do it by force. Brother Tishaka spoke about Jamaica, where I was born and bred. In 1969, when Jamaica changed from the English pound sterling to the Jamaican dollar, you know what was the exchange rate? 2 to 1. 2 Jamaican dollars to 1 English pound. The Jamaican dollar was 100%, was double that of the US dollar. It was 4 US dollars to the English pound, while it was 2 Jamaican dollars to the English pound. Now it's over 200 Jamaican dollars, 2021. To things wrong. How did this come about? It came about by the trickery using their things about structural adjustment, their IMF loans and World Bank thing, all designed to control and suck our economies and to rob from our people. We simply need to trade amongst each other. The purpose of Marcus Garvey's Black Star Line was not, as most people who are ignorant think, to just put Africans in the diaspora and ships and carry them to Mother Africa. No. The essential purpose of the Black Star Line was to facilitate trade, economic working together between Africans at home and Africans abroad. Because Marcus Garvey realized that we needed that form of vehicle to promote and enhance our economic empowerment as Africans.
Okay. So same to you, Brother Abiola. So question of aid and trade. I mean, we have heard a lot of the trick going on with the kind of aid. So what's your take on it? Any African government or Caribbean government for that matter would be brave enough to look to we no longer want aid?
I think aid and trade are just political, economic instruments. So they are like knives. They can be used to cook or to kill. So they are not bad or good in itself. And I think President Thomas Sankara said that we want aid that help us get off the aid. We don't want aid that get us addicted to aid. So we can choose the type of aid or the type of trade that we want to do. For example, we can see that the United States give billions of dollars to Israel each year to build up their military, and this is positive for Israel. We can also see that China is today number one or number two economic power in the world, and they got aid from the West. Clearly, they got investment, massive amounts of investments to build up their industrial bases, and now they are a threat to the West. So they were able to use that smartly. But to be able to be in that situation when you can choose what is good aid and what is bad aid, what is good trade and what is bad trade, you need to be able to not need that aid. You need to be able to not need that trade. You need to be able to stand by yourself and to live in autarky if needed. And I remember a comment by then, it was the paramount leader of China. His name was Deng Xiaoping. And when the Tiananmen events happened, the West threw a lot of sanctions against China, and Deng Xiaoping responded by saying, "That's okay. We will talk together in 1 year or 2 years, because they will give us sanctions. But one thing we are good, we have gotten good along the years, is living with sanctions. You see. So if we are able to live autonomously by ourselves, doing business with other Africans, we'll be able then, because we won't need it, to do good aid, good trade, and be able to choose. Currently, we are not able to choose.
Okay. So, Brother Dale, so what's your take on this then? The whole question. Do you think if you was a president in Africa and the West came along and a few billions, you think something that you would be inclined to take, or we, our country is rich in X, Y, and Z material trade instead? Okay, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm sad to say that the only president I think that would have been brave enough to do that was recently taken from us. So, you know, I think that any aid that's ever given to us has always been, you know, Trojan horse designed to actually bring us down. So I'll just take this opportunity to say RIP to the most honourable President Magufuli, because he's the only one that I think was strong enough to stand up to the aid. And, you know, I don't know. The only thing that I've ever heard good, I don't even want to say it's good, about aid is that when somebody told me that some Nigerian Yahoo boys were doing fraud to take aid money from the money because the money was just sitting in people's banks. That's the way I've heard it on the thing. That's the only thing I've heard. I've heard that it's just sitting in people's banks and waiting for either corrupt governance or white men to continue their agenda. So, yeah, no, pretty boring, my answer.
Okay. Brother Cypher, what's your take on the whole approach? And I also like to talk on, say, in the West diaspora, the community, do you think the government have also used a kind of trickery to hoodwink people by you know, a lot of these grants that was given out in the past, only when you it was ripped away from you?
The first thing I would say is that if you look at the first generation of our leaders, I think the vast majority of them, the first generation, they had very good intentions, but they were you're literally trying to build a country that hasn't been invested in for 30, 40 years, and you're trying to build infrastructure, create jobs, create an economy, feed your people, all at the same time. So I think that we've got the benefit of looking at what went right and what went wrong, and that's how I look at life. You got two types of wisdom. You got the wisdom that you learn from your own experience, and you got the wisdom which I believe is superior, where you can look at somebody else's experience and you can adjust your actions accordingly. And I think that we've got the benefit of looking at what happened to the first generation of African and Caribbean leaders and how aid was used against them. So we know not to fall into the same traps and make the same mistakes. I think there is a need for us to focus on trade. Ishaka mentioned this thing about the need for economic development, and I agree with that. And I think that between us as states, we have resources. For example, there was a time when I was doing some helping a African government obtain sugar. And I said to the ambassador of that country, I said, have you spoken to anybody in the Caribbean? Because this is one of the major sugar producing areas in the world. No, we haven't. We've got, if you think about, you've got cement in this country, you've got oil in that country, you've got sugar in this country. You've got resources in different countries. If we start to actually trade amongst each other, and further, even better, would be for governments to actually invest money in infrastructure so that the processing of raw materials is done in our own countries. So we're not just taking cocoa and selling people raw cocoa or selling people raw materials. We're processing the cement, we're processing the cocoa, we're processing the coffee, we're processing the gold, we're processing the diamonds and the aluminium and the bauxite and everything else. The money is not really in just the raw commodity. The real profit is in the development of that commodity into items that people buy, into the phones and the watches and the rings and the jewelry and the actual food products that people buy and they eat. We need to change our way of thinking. It's not about in the 21st century, I've got this raw product and I'm going to sell to you. No, no, no. I'm going to take some money and I'm going to invest in infrastructure. And if you're going to take aid to do that, and you say, right, I'm going to take these billions and I'm going to invest in infrastructure, so I never have to ask you for anything ever again. After this date, it's only going to be trade business only. Then I think aid could be useful in that way. But if it's just, I'm going to take this money to feed myself now, it's not useful. As Brother Adiola said, it's like a tool that can be, it can be used for good or for ill. So for me, trade is the way forward. And that trade will be beneficial if we start to think more international. Our countries need to start talking to each other. Our regions need to start talking to each other and be practical and start doing work. So I say to Brother Oba, right, do you know anybody who's got a factory here who produces this? And I can speak to a brother here in Nigeria who's producing something there that we need in Chicago, and that maybe we can actually find another market in Europe. We need to start thinking like that. And then that's when the trade becomes actually really powerful.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Asha, I mean, recently, I think it's a you know, in hints, especially like, you know, Ghana produce a lot of cocoa and stuff that go to Switzerland and it would be, you know, producing its own chocolate because they're kind of stirring you. I mean, do you think he's going down the right track?
Sorry,
If you want to, if you want to work,
you're breaking up. So
trade with us.
it's difficult
Okay.
to understand the question.
Your voice
I mean,
is breaking up.
Again, any better?
Yeah, if you're talking aid versus
Uh,
trade, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, there's two things that I want to say, because firstly, I don't think we should let Dambisa Moyo off the hook. Okay, Dambisa Moyo is somebody who is the Candice Owens of America, where she uses common sense global white supremacy language to belittle and place Africa as if Africa is some child that, you know, the devil needs to invest in her to come across and sort out. I'm not into her use of right-wing economic common sense language. without looking at the fact that, well, all of the things that Elder Oba said about the way Africa was deliberately impoverished, and not looking at the fact that we only got flag independence and not economic independence. Her views completely ignore the economic stranglehold placed on African economies. And so this common sense position that she takes, as if she ever gave a damn about Africa and aid, is completely disingenuous and totally fraud. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else has said. I'm going to come at it from a different point of view, because aid is a complete and utter red herring. I've only got figures from 2002 to 2006. And then Africa received $84 billion of aid. And our remittances, that's the money that Africans send to Africa, doubled that and more at 167 billion. So who's providing aid to Africa? It's Africans in the diaspora who are sending remittances to African countries. We're the ones providing the aid. Direct investment was only 226 billion and loans were 380 billion. So the total inward flow of income was 857 billion. The outflow, profit from remittances, 130 billion, debt services, 456 billion. Aid, 84 billion, debt management, 456 billion. And the estimated illicit flow, that is money that they do not pay tax on, 619 billion. So the net outflow is 348 billion. So who's zooming who here? Okay, it's a completely disingenuous argument. And when our people don't know the actual figures and the fact that those people who provide the most aid to Africa is us through our direct remittances. That's the reality of the situation. And Dambisa Moyo needs to be thrown under a bus, where she can go and join Candace Owens and dine with the devils that they like to mess around with and pretend that somehow what's coming out of their mouth sounds so common sense, when all it is good old common sense racism with a somebody, a minstrel who is prepared to do the dirty work for them. I'm not in it, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, man. So, same to you, aid versus trade. I mean, obviously, I've heard what others have said. So, what's your take on the whole topic?
Is that for me, Brother Taka?
Yeah. I'm not sure
Okay.
if it's
Sorry,
having some
it
problem.
was breaking up a bit. No, I think much of the issues as regards aid and trade have been covered in a very meaningful manner. What I'll say, though, is that it is very important for us to always keep the contextual aspect as pertains to the relationship between aid and politics. That at the end of the day, this so-called aid is actually about political manipulation, because it's designed in such a manner that it keeps the recipient countries beholden to the countries that are giving them aid. It keeps them beholden to entities like the IMF and the World Bank, and therefore cannot really do anything the way they see fit. As long as a country opens up to receiving aid from the IMF, receiving aid from the World Bank, they are effectively giving them access to their economic policies. So now they have a say in what exactly should be done, because under the pretext that they are protecting whatever they are putting into that particular country. And you find that aid has been used a lot for purposes of regime change. So we cannot dismiss the relationship between aid, the manipulation of government, and the manipulation of the population as well. So from that perspective, the sooner we can do away with aid and realize, like Dr. Asha is saying, that the bulk of the aid to Africa is actually from the African diaspora. See how we translate that relationship into trade as well. The African diaspora must not have to bear the brunt of giving aid to Africa, but there must be something that is actually elevated to a position where we are trading one with the other and we develop an African economy.
Brother Taharka, could I make a point? Brother
Okay.
Taharka?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a very important point made by Brother Mandingo, and it was about how Jamaica was done in and how they had a better exchange rate. Their currency was worth more than the dollar in relationship to the pound, and now it's worth nothing. I just wanted to give an example of where it's worked in our favor and a key reason. Barbados. I'm married to a Barbadian. I, in fact, met her in the UK. Barbados has undergone a couple of periods where they had to take aid from the IMF a couple of times. But they maintain their exchange rate, which is 2-to-1 to the dollar. And they've just had to come under IMF sanctions or aid because of the before COVID, they had some problems. But the key point that I want to stress is they maintain not only the integrity of their dollar, but their economy because of good leadership. Leadership was crucial. Now, unlike Jamaica, they did not have uranium and aluminum. They didn't have a raw material. What they had was the tourism and banking. But what they had was good leadership. And so when they got IMF aid, the first thing they did was see that they assessed their population and they saw, first of all, that they would have to tighten their belts because they're going to pay this back right away. And so they took cuts. So the prime minister took a cut in his pay. And what they did is they then went and advanced retirement. But they saw, so that they cut state budget. But they saw that every house was surveyed so that no house would go without an employed person. They had a government that cared. And they've only had one corrupt government in their history. That's the one before this one. The rest of them have been honest. Barbadian leaders can walk throughout their country without armed guards. You understand? So I'm not saying that's the sole thing. And the example of China, Deng Xiaoping, you know what I mean? A good part of the aid that came to China in its, modernization came from overseas Chinese. And of course, they benefited from deindustrialization. And they ate crow with the Japanese, who were their enemies, so that they could use their, economic technology. And they played the game of humility. Now they're not playing that game anymore. But the key point is leadership is the key thing. Leadership. Honest leadership.
Yeah.
Not corrupt.
Okay, so in the final 10 minutes or so, one last question. Is everybody here okay?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Now, if you was an advisor to a government, to a Caribbean government, you're now advising them. So how would you advise them? How can a Caribbean government break from the economic system set up in Bretton Woods in 1944? And first, because I know he knows a lot about Bretton Woods. For those who know Bretton Woods, the whole Bretton together was. How would you advise government the best way free, or how can we as African people break free from those systems which have been incarcerated by since 1944. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll leave Brother Oti Shaka till last, because he knows a lot on this issue. So instead, I'll go first to Brother Abi, and the whole question is, how can African governments break free of that system, set up a system of their own? What would you advise them?
Thank you for the question. I will use what Brother Obat Shaka said about leadership, because it's the most important thing. And honestly, I don't know another situation in the Caribbean to be specific about that, but for the countries that I know, most of them have a leadership that is not committed to bring power to the country, because Marcus Garvey was all about power, and we don't have any leaders currently, at least most of them, who really want to bring power to Africans in Africa. And in that situation, I can't really give them advice, because I know they won't follow any advice. And to me, the key takeaway is that as Pan-Africanists and as Garveyites, we have a set of programs that we want to implement. And since the 60s, since Kwame Nkrumah has been ousted, there have not been any major political progress on that front on the continent or in the Caribbean. We don't have any Garveyite political party on the continent today, which is advancing any concrete plans to change the situation. So we can't ask to people who are not in this mindset, to people who are neo-colonialists, to bring measures or programs that can change things. The only thing that we can do is to keep organized and maybe find ways to get better organized and be able to do bigger things, especially on the political level.
Okay. Because we're really running out of time. So, Brother Mandy, same question to you. In Caribbean governments found, what would be your best way for us to break those chains?
The best way is that we Pan-Africanists have to continue working towards getting rid of all of those in the misleadership positions in the Caribbean, because all of them are anti-Pan-Africanists. All of them. Any figment of any Pan-Africanism you hear, it's merely lip service. So only we as Pan-Africanists in the Caribbean can do this job. And that involves us working to get rid of these traitors. And by so doing, we would link up and work with the Pan-Africanists in Mother Africa, who also have to work to get rid of the traitors in the misleadership positions in Mother Africa. Because whether in the diaspora or in Mother Africa, our major problem internally are these traitors who we have to remove by any means necessary. And I really, really mean that. Without that, we will not make any more forward steps.
Okay. So I'll go to Brother Dio. I don't know if you know him. The whole when I mentioned Britain, would be talking about the Isle Bank and all these institutions.
I know all about
have a stronger hold and yeah, great. So what the Caribbean government?
I mean, you cut out a little bit there, but I think I got the gist of what you're saying. I mean, you know what I'm going to say? The first thing I would do is get all of the treasury of that country and transfer it into Bitcoin, of course. Next thing I would do is next thing I'm confident and I care about my people, so let me take Bitcoin seriously. The second thing I would I think they'll do is start working on their own central on a digital currency, but work on the economics of the currency to allow the economics to allow the currency to be tied into the commodities of the country, so that when the people are transacting, they're actually getting real value as opposed to this baseless currency. So when I say a government-backed currency, it's not in Bretton Woods baseless kind of way, in one that's actually backed on industry. And the third thing that I would say is the most important thing is I would say that they need to really invest their time into industries. So there's a lot of really big industries across the world that are really saturated, that people fight with tooth and nail, and they will die trying to fight and defend. But a lot of these things are becoming outdated. We're not wearing as much gold. Gold is now more gold is used as a store of value as it is as people actually wearing it. So what are these industries of the future? I think we talk about IT. There's a lot of Africans that pay for their family right now through offering IT services to people around the world. I think we should be investing more time there. I think there's other industries. Some people might say this is controversial, but marijuana. Why aren't we growing marijuana and selling it to Canada and America? There's a lot of industries that are untapped. That if you have a national look at it and start putting time and effort into it, I feel that you could start changing lives in Africa quite quickly. But
Okay, because time is gone. So, Brother Cypher, same to you in terms of all these things that came out of Bretton Woods, put a stranglehold over the world, especially African Caribbean countries. What would be your move in terms of breaking free and setting up?
I mean, the first thing that I would do is I would basically sit down with the leadership and say, look, we are going to run a program for 10 years where we are focusing on economic development. We're focusing on education of our young people and our children. We're focusing on innovation and industry and infrastructure. We're going to make our country a clean, safe, healthy place to live. We're going to make sure our children and our elders are looked after, and that we have a stable level of well-being in the society. And the next thing is about, we need to be making things, we need to be creating things, we need to be designing things. And I would get the people who are experienced in industry and bring those people and the smartest people and the people who've been actually doing the work disparately together to work on this program to actually put it into action. So we get the best minds and we get the people who actually go out there and do stuff. Build better roads,
Okay, that's
communities, running water, great education, and in the end of 10 to 15 years, you've now got a generation of young people who are smart, who are ready to step into roles, but that you're actually keeping the smart people in your country. They don't have to go to the US, they don't have to go to Europe. They can actually work in developing the infrastructure of the country and improving industry in the country and actually have a good lifestyle while being in their own space. So that's why we'll do an actual solid 10 to 15 year program of development focused.
okay. That's great. And now the same for you, Dr.
Yeah.
Here now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would do completely.
Great.
Yeah, I would do completely the opposite of what's been done now. It's just as simple as that. Okay, because if we were ever going to achieve anything using the systems that are in place now, with the people that are in place now, we would have achieved it already. So for me, there has to be something completely different that bypasses some of the systems that are in place now. And I go back to my previous point. If we are the biggest investors, if we are the biggest aid donors to Africa, then I think there is a missing link there about what we are doing with well, it's probably more now, close to $200 billion of investment that we are putting into our mother country. We have to do more with it, and we have to do completely the opposite of what's being done now.
Okay. So, Mr. Bello, the same question to you in terms of what came out of Bretton Woods, basically whole around the African continent and the Caribbean. Say, I mean, what would be your way for eradicating those kind of systems?
Well, the basic way that I would push mainly is aspects related to education and the economy, and the necessity to consolidate the relations between the Caribbean countries and the African countries, and begin to lessen the strengths of relations that exist between the Caribbean and the West, so that we facilitate a scenario where, when we are trading amongst and between each other, the barriers to trade are reduced in as far as Africa and the Caribbean, and at the same time facilitate a greater freedom of movement between the people from Africa to the Caribbean and back and forth, really. Once we do that and we structure an education system that speaks to both realities as regards the Caribbean and Africa, then we are fostering a scenario where the future generations of Africans globally will be able to speak the same language, because one of the things that keeps us apart as regards the diaspora and the continent is that we don't have a cohesive system of education that is instilled in our children from basically the time they get exposed to schooling up to wherever they end with their schooling. So my issue would be to look at both the African situation and the Caribbean situation and see how we can align the two. Thank you.
And finally, Dr. Obert, you've heard the question, because I know you're very around that area, Bretton Woods. 1944, they came up with which is still very much holding the world, especially the African Caribbean countries. So what would be your best take in terms of how to the rest of themselves free?
First, around education, we need to shift the paradigm of education. The paradigm of education is not only Western because it miseducates us on our history and perpetuates a colonial history. If you go into most African countries, their universities, I've spoken some, it's all colonial education. That, of course, has to be ended, but it's the methodology of education that is the worst part. Western education creates puppets. It doesn't just create black puppets, it creates white puppets as well. It is a system of memorization or regurgitation. I'm finishing a work that breaks that paradigm called SEBR, which is bringing out your inner light. We have to have education where the truths we learn are the truths we live. And that's a different educational paradigm. That shapes leaders that base their leadership on love. Deng Xiaoping did what he did out of love. His son was dropped out of the second or third story and paralyzed. But he served his country because he loved China. And we've got to love our people. That's number one. Number two, when Jamaica was brought to its knees, it was self-sufficient in ground provision. Milk, meat, everything. And it was the Jamaican farmers that produced it. Protect your domestic economy. And the key thing is protect the ground provisions first and protect them with tariffs. Do not allow any aid to stop that. The third thing is, as was said before, do your best, whatever the materials that you have, raw materials, control the process. Pull it out of the ground, manufacture it, and get you some ships where you ship it to the world. Final thing. We have colonial or enslaved taste in the Caribbean, in Africa. We like the things coming from the West. And that partially dictates bad trade agreements because part of it is that's being used to bring in trinkets from the West. Condition your taste. That was one of the things Kwame Nkrumah recommended. He said, tighten your belt. And not Nkrumah, W.B. Du Bois. That was the advice that he gave Kwame Nkrumah. He said, instead of Rolls Royces and refrigerators and all the rest of this, tighten your belts and work on developing the country. In this case, tighten our taste. We don't need all the goodies that come from the West, you know, sweets that are imported from the West, all these other things, you know, and a lot of us, the ground provisions keep you alive. You live a long time, and now you're eating sugar, McDonald's, and all the stuff that causes diabetes and everything else. So a lot of it is decolonizing our taste, de-enslaving our taste, because a lot of them are Western. It isn't just white women that some of us want. Anything white people produce, we want. You know what I mean? So this is a part of it. It's a big job. And the final point, everybody's made this point. In the Caribbean, a lot of Caribbean leaders wanted a collaboration of all the Caribbean nations. But you had some key leaders. The labor union leader in Jamaica didn't want it. Bustamante. There were others that didn't want it. Without unity, you have nothing. And again, if you have leaders that care about their people, their egos don't come first. And final thing I'd say is this: ask the people. The people got answers. They're the ones that build an economy. Let them have the major say so in what's produced or anything else that happens. That's for Africa. That's the Caribbean. That's here. That's global. And if that happens, people prosper.
Okay, thank you very much for this session. Completely ran out of time. So I'd just like to say thank you, Dr. Shaka. Thank you to Dr. Asha. Thank you to Brother Abiola. Thank you and Brother Sabello and Deo. Thank you very much for taking part in the discussion. It was, I hope those in, you know, found it educational. Because economically, as I said, if you can flag, fine. But if you do hold economies of your country, we're still enslaved. And we know what Europe did in 1944. Europe and America got together and said, let's further put a stronger hold on these countries. And it's the system which we are still under today. So when we're talking about free Africa, a freeing of black people, nothing we can free ourselves within their system. We have to opt out of their system in order to find true liberation.